Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our fourth season, we're looking at Kenneth Branagh's 2011 film, Thor. I'm Matthew Fox from theethicalpanda.com.
From the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And today we're talking about minute 26, which begins with the ice breaking up and ends with Thor feeling a little overwhelmed. Joining us on the show today is one of my favorite guests, Will Freeland of the Hype is My Superpower moment. I've gotten to have Will on a number of episodes of my own podcast, and I'm really excited to have him joining us here today. Will, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Thank you for having me. Very excited to talk all things Marvel. So excited to kind of hop into this.
Awesome. And Will, you're a great person to have on because your podcast that you do with your buddy Steve is all about specifically the Marvel comics. And so we always love getting to have people talk to us about the movie and bring that perspective in. And let me just start by asking, what's your favorite Thor moment from comics that you've ever read?
Oh, man.
That's a big question.
Yeah, seriously.
I like these nice, light questions to start a guest off.
Well, to preface, I listened to your guys' primer for the movie, and it sounded like you read a lot of Jason Aaron's run on Thor and how Jason Aaron loves to put gods through the ringer. And
ever, yeah.
I don't know if it's necessarily my favorite moment, but one of my favorite runs is the end of the Mighty Thor run, where we have female Thor, and it's called The Death of Thor. It's kind of the story of how Jane, or the female Thor, ends up giving up the power of Thor, and like relinquishing the weight and the responsibility of being Thor, and how all that goes down and how they sacrifice themselves. And it's kind of like a coming of age moment for Odin, because the whole a woman becoming Thor thing happened under Odin's nose and without his consent, for lack of a better term. And it took all of this time. It took 25 issues to actually get Odin to accept this new Thor, and it all had to do with basically saving all of Asgard and the rest of the Norse gods.
Interesting. Well, cool. I would definitely want to talk to you more about that, especially once the Love and Thunder movie comes out, because I think those stories might be a little relevant there. But for now, we're really excited to have you jump into this minute, and we'll do that right after this message.
Great conversation with a lot of different guests this week, and we want to get you into that conversation. Come over to our growing group of Marvel fans in our Discord community. The community at truestory.fm/Marvel Movie Minute. Discord link that's at the top of the page.
Well, let me ask you a question about a smaller thing. So just for this 1 minute, what did you most notice? What kind of jumped out at you?
This is around the time in the movie where I started to get over it. This is not my favorite MCU movie. The gods, the 6 gods that are in this scene, you have the Warriors 3, so are Fandral, Hogun, and Volstagg, and you have Sif and Loki and Thor. And those are kind of like basically your main characters of all the Thor titles in both the comics and kind of the movies. And they just, the only thing that seemed they just had this entire storming the entire like frost giant stronghold castle, and they don't even look bloodied or worn or torn. The only thing about them is that their hair is frazzled, and they're like they look tired. And I was like, at this point, they're gods. Like they're introduced to us as gods, Norse gods. And I'm like, for gods, like you guys don't really get in the muck. Like you guys are super shiny. And like in this minute, Thor plows through a giant troll, and and there's no blood on him. Like, I get that it's a PG-13 movie, but like, you could at least have some sort of like wear and tear on your costume.
we will definitely be talking about that particular method and how squeaky clean he comes out through it. And so let's start with just the very beginning scene of this minute is that troll, the monster, the Jotun Beast, it's called, is chasing them, and it's going under the ice. And this is both a great shot until you think about it for a couple seconds, because I'm trying to understand. I'm not a geologist, but I don't see anything holding up that upper layer of ice. Like,
magic.
Is it just kind of like a cave with caverns? Like, what's going on in that moment?
Well, it is one of those areas where, I mean, it doesn't make a ton of sense. I mean, I understand how cave systems work. And obviously you have actual pockets in the ground that are hollow. And obviously they just don't collapse because the ground, the way that they're formed is strong enough to actually hold it up. And so I get that. But it does seem like this is an awfully thin layer of crust here. Usually when it's a cave, like it's a pretty thick, amount of earth between the surface and the ceiling of the cave. So it is kind of a strange thing. And I just have to like write it off as Jotunheim ice, formations. And that's kind of like how it works. It doesn't completely make sense, but I also don't understand how the Jotun Beast clings to the ceiling. Like it seems runs. So big and runs. It's not like crawling like carefully. It's like running. Like if you flipped the shot, it would look like a beast running across the surface of the ground. So it's a little funky. Like all of this stuff here is just like, I don't know. I have to not think about it too hard.
Physics is different in Jotunheim.
Clearly.
Like we're never going to be able to test it.
Right.
Biology is too clearly. That's why people don't bleed or, have gore on them.
Yeah.
And I will say that they do an interesting thing camera-wise, which is all these shots are fairly off-kilter. Like, they're never at, like, exactly level. And they're all kind of very, like, fast and cutting. And it got me at least caught up enough in the action that it wasn't until I stopped and thought about it that I was like, wait a minute, how does this make any sense? And it reminds me of how my understanding is, as people are trying to do more and more things with CGI, like anytime people are doing things where they don't quite have the CGI technology to make it the best it could be, they put everything in the dark. So, you can't quite tell. And I kind of get that sense here of the odd camera angles and the jerking back and forth helps like set the scene, but also kind of helps cover up the fact that maybe we're not in the most, realistic depiction of a scene at the moment.
That certainly holds true. And luckily for Branagh, we've seen throughout the film so far, like he really loves those Dutch angles. When he's in action sequences, he loves that handheld, shaky camera feel. So everything that we're seeing at least fits into the aesthetic that he's already established. So it's not like all of a sudden we're getting thrown these different camera techniques that just don't fit into the story that he's been telling so far. So at least to that end, it all works.
So, and then, Will, I'm really curious your thoughts on this, because then we get to our heroes run to the cliff, and they're clearly...
hold on. Before we get to the cliff, I just have to point out, in these shots, there's this fantastic shot where we actually jump from under the cave to overhead. And again, Branagh really loves those God's eye view shots where he's directly over something, and we're directly over Sif as she's running, and the ground is all falling around her. And if you walk through that shot, you'll see the ground fall away to her left, and you can actually see the Jotun Beast running past her. And it happens very quick. It's about 6 seconds into this minute, but you'll see the Jotun Beast actually dart by her. So kind of leading to this moment that you're about to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely a great shot. I caught it this time. And so then they get to the cliffs, and clearly they expect that, like, this is the place that Heimdall is going to pick them up. And one of them shouts for Heimdall, and we'll talk about that in a second. Andy and I have talked about this a bit, though. Like, does the Bifrost have, like, specific train stations on different worlds that it can only stop there? Clearly on Earth, it can go to both Norway and New Mexico. But, like, why is it that they think they have to go to this exact spot? Do you know anything about that from the comics? Or how do you view the scene in the movie?
Oh, no. Bifrost is, you shoot it, you point and click. I think the idea there is they don't want to bring anyone else through the gate to get to Asgard. And so they want to get as far away as possible. And they probably would have kept running, except they got to a cliff. And so now they're just waiting at the cliff. kind of a thing. No, but there's never like, this is the gateway right over here to Asgard kind of thing.
But it does make me think that this is, I mean, just because they did land on a cliff edge when they got here.
Yeah.
I mean, I've assumed, and perhaps I'm incorrect, but because we never see runes here, and I know in the past when the Bifrost, delivers somebody, when they've arrived, it marks the ground with the runes. And I don't know if this is the same spot and the runes are just covered up by snow, or if they're on a different cliff edge. But I always kind of assumed that this was the same location, but maybe I shouldn't be assuming that.
Yeah, it kind of comes off as that. But yeah, the leaving the runes thing, I think, is just the dramatic effect that they wanted to throw in for making kind of mysterious air to the Asgardians, because that doesn't happen in the comics.
Well, but it only seems to happen in Midgard, maybe.
Right.
Maybe, yeah.
Something special about the earth there.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because we did hear Heimdall earlier say, I won't open the gate if you're going to let something dangerous back in with you. So them trying to get that separation and failing. And at some point, someone who's not on screen yet, I think, shouts out for Heimdall. And the script doesn't say, and I couldn't quite figure out whose voice it was. I thought it was Volstagg, but do either of you know who that was?
I think it was Thor.
Yeah, well, Thor's too far. I'm pretty sure it's Volstagg also, because we see when it's happening, we do see Loki and Sif in the shot. It's obviously not Sif. We see Loki and he's not shouting it out. And then as the camera turns, all of a sudden Hogan's there. I don't think it's Hogan. I think that you're right. My assumption is that it was Volstagg who's coming up behind with Fandral on his shoulders.
They gave Hogan too strong of an accent for it to be him.
Yeah.
I have problems with that, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. It's Volstagg. Certainly, I would have trouble thinking it's Thor, because it would seem so out of character for him. But either way, we get to the edge of the cliffs, and there's no answer from Heimdall, but there is an answer from the Beast. And we're going to talk about that, but first, this scene is very different from what was originally written in the script. The Jotun Beast isn't in the script at all. And Andy, tell us more about what was supposed to happen in the script, and let's talk about kind of how that would have been different.
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about it before, where when Laufey, casts his ice magic to wake the Jotun Beast, in the script, he is actually waking a whole bunch of other hibernating frost giants that are under the ground, and they all almost zombie-like start popping up to kind of add more frost giants to the battle. And then all those frost giants pursue all the Asgardians toward the cliff. The ground isn't crumbling. You don't have all that. But what happens, and it's so strange, is the frost giants all pause and they all breathe out frost breath. So this is how it's written in the script. As the Jotuns race toward the Asgardians, they open their mouths wide and breathe out an icy fog. The swirling mists quickly engulf the fleeing Asgardians before them. The Asgardians stand in the mist, unable to see. Hogan takes a step back, the ice cracking beneath him. They dare not move for fear of falling through into the void below. And then, of course, Thor sees what's happening, raises Mjolnir high, summoning the winds. They lift him off the ground and carry him across the frozen wasteland to his comrades. He lands behind them in the shroud of mists. And then Loki, Thor says to Loki, "Loki, we have to see." Loki raises his arms, concentrates, the mists dissipating. And that's when you see all of these frost giants standing in front of them. So it's kind of an interesting... Cool. It would have been cool, but it's such a strange, I can only imagine seeing all these frost giants stop and just all of them in unison, breathing out a big breath and filling this whole area with fog. It's such a strange picture.
Is that something that they ever do in the comics? In terms of this frog bath? Or okay.
Well, so frost giants in the comics...
Fog breath, not frog breath.
Frost giants in the comics are just big blue guys. They range from 16 feet tall to 60 feet tall. They're just like cavemen. They have loincloths and cool bone earrings and random accoutrement. And they their preferred weapons are clubs and swords. They're your go-to big monster guys that happen to be blue. And so they're from Jotunheim. This whole the magic stuff isn't really a frost giant thing, but they have 10 realms of usable characters in the comics, and so they can throw the magic somewhere else instead.
Right. Yeah, I kind of feel like that scene would have been awesome to watch, but also very much changed how I saw the Frost Giants, because now, to me, that's just a very, like, I see them a lot like what you're talking about, Will. Like, they're just big and strong, and they hit you really hard, and they have weapons. Now they're getting into, like, magic breath and stuff like that. I feel like that just makes them a very different kind of antagonist or character.
Well, I don't know if it's magic breath other than, I mean, because it seems honestly like frost giants are kind of big, cold beasts. And I guess from my perspective, like forming ice on their hands might almost seem a little more magical than just if they're just cold beings and they just breathe out. But I guess both of them are kind of strange little icy sorts of things.
And I guess I meant they're not that like one is magic and one is not, but more like, you know, they're going from being like the barbarian in the D&D party to the sorcerer. You know, like it's a stand and calmly breathe kind of thing instead of just like charge in and whomp on people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to your point about magic, like the whole idea of Loki being the one who is asked by Thor to use his own magic to like dissipate the mists. That's another interesting element that is in this, the way that it would have been scripted.
Yeah, like I can totally see a some internet poster guy going off about how that's the first time we see, you know, hints towards him being a frost giant, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
So instead we do get the beast. Let's talk about that. And did anyone else think that it looks a lot bigger when it just shows up right in front of them than it had like when it was charging or other times like that?
I never can quite tell. I don't know if it's a perspective thing or what, but yeah, when the head of the frost or the Jotun Beast or the Frost Beast pops up off the edge of the cliff right in front of our 5 heroes standing there, it just seems enormous. I mean, I look at it, I'm like, is that the right size? Because that is massive. And I mean, I know it's big, but it just seems so much bigger than it had any time they were being chased by it.
So of course, then Thor, showing what a brave, noble warrior he is, flies up into the air and flies directly away. And I'm guessing his friends know what he's doing because he's done this before. But I have to admit, if like this guy had led me into battle, this huge monster was showing itself to me, and now our leader was flying in the exact opposite direction, I wouldn't be very happy.
Do you think that he's flying? See, I think that he's flying directly toward them. The way that I see it is because the camera, from the way I can tell, the camera like follows him as he, he's standing right in front of the palace, and he flies straight up into the air, and then the camera, as it's following him, kind of spins and comes down looking toward them. And I think he actually flies up and toward them. That's the way that I've read it.
Yeah, I feel like at the beginning of that minute, he is somewhere else. He's been separated from the rest of the party.
Okay, that makes more sense, because what I thought was happening was that he was kind of close to them, and he basically flies all the way back to kind of get a running start. Yeah. You know? And I'm also wondering, like, why isn't the beast just attacking his friends while, like, we're waiting for this to happen? But that interpretation does make more sense. So thank you.
The thing that confuses me, though, is we're looking at them as the giant Jotun Beast pops up in front of them, and Thor like turns to look at them. And I mean, we have seen him, like, he is still, he told them to go. He's still in front of the palace battling all these the frost giants. But then he turns and looks at them, and I'm like, are they now implying, like, I mean, maybe not Heimdall level eyesight, but is he able to see what's happening from where he is? The fact that the Jotun Beast is threatening his friends? Because all of a sudden, the way that shot is constructed, I feel like he sees it.
Yeah, it was kind of weird.
And I don't think that's ever been a power of Thor.
No.
Like, even in the comics, that he can see things far away, like Heimdall can.
Maybe he just heard it yell or roar.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like, it is pretty big. So it does, take up a lot of room there. And then we get the moment that seems to be, Will, your personal favorite in the minute, where Thor defeats the beast because he flies at it at top speed. It conveniently opens its mouth to roar, and he flies right through the mouth, and I guess into kind of like goes basically straight through the spine or whatever the thing at the back of your neck is, connecting your brain to your body, and just punches right through it. and kills the monster, which kind of dramatically falls off the cliff. But then, as you said, like that red cloak, which again is brilliant in how it is so visible against the dark grays and blues of everyone else. But there's just not a spot of blood or gore or anything you might get by flying literally through a monster's flesh.
Right. Which is something, I guess, I feel like ever since Guardians of the Galaxy, they're way more okay with showing like random guts of monsters that aren't of beings that aren't human. And because that gives you an opportunity to kind of make a joke out of it. But the first Thor definitely was not going for much comedy other than like Thor trying to learn how to be a human. So yeah, it always stood out to me, like the visual of the gaping hole in the Jotun Beast is awesome, and I love it. And then Thor landing, it either means one of two things. One, they don't want to show gore and guts, and it's like, okay, fine, whatever. Or two, he was going so fast that none of the guts could touch him because he went through so fast. And I'll take either explanation, but I just need somebody to tell me what it is.
Star Wars established that a lightsaber will perfectly cauterize a wound.
Right.
So that way you could have like people running around the galaxy cutting off limbs right and left in a PG movie without any blood. So maybe it's that like everything is frozen. And so, like, there's no blood, which then again raises some biology questions. But either way, this has been a complaint of mine about the MCU as a whole, is that for the most part, the PG and PG-13 movies never show any of that. But then in the Netflix MCU, which is basically much more of an R rating, they do show blood and gore and things like that. And I get with the ratings, but it sort of creates a situation where it's okay to show kids violence, but it's not okay to show kids the consequences of violence. That's only for adults. That's my whole other ethical thing, but it's just something I wish wasn't happening in all these movies.
Well, we do see, Fandral. I mean, just as defense. I mean, I agree with you, honestly. But in defense, we do see Fandral get impaled on an ice stalagmite that pops out of the ground. And when they pull him off of it, it's bloody. So, I mean, at least there's a moment of showing, okay, somebody did actually get injured here.
Yeah. Our heroes can bleed. So, and that raises its own questions. But sure, that is definitely something we've mentioned before and worth mentioning again. Well, and part of my question about the Jotun Beast is, well, and obviously it's a different type of creature than the frost giants. But the frost giants, as we've seen, although you got to really kind of go step by step and frame by frame, when they get hit or injured, their body is like, or their injured parts are breaking into ice and kind of crumbling away, which is interesting. But the Jotun Beast clearly doesn't have that same makeup. It actually, like, you see stuff come out of the back of its head, and it's just laying there with a giant hole in the back of its throat before it falls off the cliff. So it's a totally different type of being, I guess, here on Jotunheim. Yeah.
I did want to just since you commented on the Jotun Beast last time, I do have to bring this up because I was awfully impressed with you. I found a note from the effects company that had worked on some of this stuff, and this is a quote from the article where they're interviewing them. The Frost Beast was a true monster mash of different ideas. The dozens of concepts that we presented to Marvel were creature designer Nick Lloyd's ideas. Miguel Ortega built the digital model, which Christopher Nichols textured using elephant skin as a major reference for its exterior look. The face, resembling a turtle, crossed with the Rancor from Star Wars, was something that Marvel specifically referenced in their design notes.
Definitely had Rancor vibes. Well done.
I could not believe you pulled that. It was so impressive that you brought that up. So there you go.
I think it's kind of the clock being right twice a day, because if I just assume Star Wars is in everything, then it'll be in some things, So we'll just kind of edit out all the times that I say it and I'm wrong, and then all our listeners will think I'm a genius.
Well, it does have. I mean, it's the neck. The neck screams Rancor. Like, it's got that same kind of longer on the back, scrunched up in front. Because only Rancors and the Frost Beast have that design. No other creatures in all of media have that design. But
pretty interesting.
Those I pointed out, I think before, I am glad that we don't get the Return of the Jedi moment where you see the Rancor trainer kind of run out and be so sad that his baby died. And like, I'm glad we don't get that here. You know, no Frost Giant is like,
oh, come on. I want to see Lofi in tears.
It just, I'm struggling so hard to find things redeemable in Thor at this point that don't make that even worse, you know? He gets a lot better for sure. And he's damn nice to look at, except the eyebrows, but let's not make him even worse.
I did want to bring up, we didn't talk about Mjolnir and that this is really the first time we see this next usage of Mjolnir, which we hadn't seen up to this point, where Thor is able, we've seen him throw it, but now we see him actually throw it, and simply by the fact that he holds on when he throws it, he essentially flies. I don't know how he turns in midair. Like when he's in front of Utgard Hall, he swings it, throws it straight up into the air, and then somehow curves so that he's basically, now going 90 degrees parallel to the ground, heading over toward where they are. And also, I don't know how he then drops himself down in altitude so he's like right at Jotun Beast head height. Like none of that makes sense to me. And once he's gone through the Jotun Beast, like he's obviously doing a full loop, like I don't know how he does it when he's throwing the hammer. It makes no sense to me, but he loops because he comes straight down to land on the ground. It's nonsense, but it's so cool. I guess I forgive it.
I'm wondering if he has like really good leg control, because if you hold your legs perfectly together and then move them, like you can sort of have a rudder effect, like you're,
like a tail on an airplane. Fish. Yeah, right.
You know what I wonder? I wonder if it's like you use the momentum of going forward, so you always have forward propulsion, and then you try to summon Mjolnir at the same time, and so it starts to turn, and then you stop summoning it, and that's how you.
That could be as good an explanation as anything. we need a physicist and a biologist to come on this episode at some point, and just like walk us through the science of Jotunheim, because I'm sure it all holds up.
Oh, I'm sure it all makes perfect sense.
we do, though, then get one of my favorite Thor moments in the movie, which is where he lands and he just has that triumphant look on his face, like, guys, I did it. You all were worried. I got you back. Don't worry about it. Thor's here to the rescue.
Your savior has arrived.
And then he turns and sees just that the whole army of frost giants, led by Laufey, has trapped them on this tiny little cliff. And just the way his face falls is like, it's not even comedic, although it is funny, but it's just like, okay, now I get it. This is the moment where the hero who thinks nothing can go wrong, it has finally occurred to him that maybe this is a little worse than he thought.
Yeah.
I really like how that works. Like that sells some of the arrogance of Thor, right? He's so cocky about this moment, and then he lands and he in all of his, clean of Jotun Beast gore glory, that he's just so thrilled with himself only to see that the whole army is here. Although I still question, because we see when he's flying, there's a great overhead shot of him as he's zipping across the sky before he hits the Jotun Beast. We actually see the ground that had been completely crumbled away from when he brought the lightning down at the palace. And I just have to question, like, how does Laufey and all these frost giants, how do they get here so fast? Like, I don't know if I can wrap my head around that. But anyway, that's another point.
Because movies.
Movies, exactly. Because we need them too.
Yeah, because presumably Thor is moving at an incredible speed.
Yeah.
And they weren't very far behind him. And so they show up like 2 seconds, and they don't look like they're all just running up. Like they're just standing there waiting.
Yeah, right.
So,
right.
Yeah. Again, this is perhaps not the most technically proficient minute we get in the movie, but there's definitely fun to it.
Yeah,
yes.
It actually, so you pointing out, the whole Thor being triumphant and landing all happy and so proud. I think the original screenwriting would have taken away from that, where it shows Thor as more of a leader general using his soldiers to help improve their situation, where he's like telling Loki, hey, we need to get rid of this fog. And in the version that we got, it's all Thor being bullheaded and being the only one. The reason why they got there, the reason why they went, and him like showing them, guys, we could do this. Like it's all about Thor, Thor, Thor.
100%. Yeah.
So, and that's pretty much where the minute ends. This has been great. Will or Andy, do you guys have any last things you want to bring up?
My only last comment is just I'm a little, I don't ever completely buy the eye lines right at that last moment when we cut to Laufey and the Frost Giants. They're looking at like human eye level. Like I feel like they need to be looking down if they're looking at these Asgardians. When we cut to Thor, he is kind of looking up a little bit. So I feel like, okay, they got that close up right. But with all the Frost Giants, I feel like, especially Laufey, I feel like, they should be kind of looking down a little more. But, that's a minor complaint at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So Thor, the movie kind of killed the MCU for me. It potentially killed the MCU for me. And I put all of my future MCU movie watching money on Captain America, the First Avenger, because I didn't like Thor. I needed First Avenger to be at least acceptable and to convince me to go watch Avengers. But wow. Thor was a low point for me in the beginning of the MCU.
Do you still feel that way when you revisit it, or has it grown in your estimation?
It's still one of my bottom tier movies, but it doesn't break the world for me anymore.
Yeah. I think I got very lucky, and then I saw the Iron Man movie, and I loved it. I saw the Incredible Hulk movie, I loved it. I just was never interested in Thor or Captain America, and so I skipped those, and then I saw the Avengers movie, and that made me so fall in love with the character of Thor that I think it gave me a much better appreciation. But I'll also say that I love this movie a lot more, also now having seen Ragnarok and the Loki show, because that makes it sound like it's a daytime talk show, the Loki TV show. But because it gives me so much more appreciation for all of that. So, well, thank you so much for suffering through a minute of your not favorite movie, but I think you have so much to contribute, and you're going to be back for 5 minutes at a later point. Really looking forward to that. For people who are now excited to hear more of you and your partner Steve and what you two talk about in terms of comic books, where can they find you?
Find us. We have a podcast called Hype is My Superpower. Come and check it out. Me and my best buddy Steve connect from opposite sides of the country, and we talk about the comics that we've read over the last week. It's been a lot of fun, and I just love talking about comics. So it's great having created a podcast where I get to do that.
Awesome. Well, yeah, definitely check it out. One thing I love about it is I know super comics nerds really enjoy it, but for myself, as a person who's very rarely read comics, you guys explain enough of what's going on. You say, okay, here's what happens, and then let's talk about it in a way that I'm fully caught up and I can appreciate and understand. It's kind of like the Cliff Notes,
Yeah.
So I really love that. I want to encourage people, if you're a huge comics nut or you just want to learn more about the comics, definitely check it out. So, Will, thank you so much for being a part of this. Andy, as always, thank you so much to all of our fans. You're awesome. Please stick with us. And everybody out there, have a good day.
Take care.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is One Last Ride by Martin Puringer. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.